So, Jerry Harvey, let's start with some introductions. My name's Baggy. I'm from Sound Devices, and I am sat here today with Jerry Harvey, the founder of JH Audio. Some would say the godfather of in-ears. I know you hate that, Jerry.
I hate it.
You hate it, I know. But it's true. It happened. You've been making in-ear monitors for a long time, like the 90s, right?
Yeah, 31 years this year.
Right. So let's go back 31 years and then tell these listeners how you started the crazy idea of putting ear drivers in your ear instead of people using widgets.
Okay, so let me start from the beginning. I didn't start the concept of in-ear monitors. I just tried to make it better.
Okay.
So 93 is when the concept of in-ear monitors came in. There was remember Garwood radio station, and there was a company called Future Sonics and Sensophonics. And a gentleman named Steve Ambrose, who was actually, it was one or three people claim that they started in-ear monitors, but I think Steve Ambrose was probably the one. But so about 94, I started working for Engelbert Humperdinck, and he started using in-ear monitors. So I've done 3 or 4 shows with Engelbert, which at that point in time made me an expert because nobody had ever done in-ear monitors before. So the next call I get is a call from Van Halen that they want to put the drummer, Alex Van Halen, on in-ear monitors because he's got a PA system behind him and one of Eddie's 4x12s on stun, and he's losing his hearing. He's got bad ringing, and they want to try to protect his hearing so they can extend their career or touring career. So I show up at rehearsals. I don't know these guys. I have a set of, Future Sonics. I have a set of Sensophonics, and I have Garwood radio station, which was, state of the art at the time. And I give him one set of earpieces, and he puts them in. He starts playing. He goes, do you know how to mix at all?
Wow.
I'm like, well, I think I know how to mix. So I said, I don't really, want to blame my equipment, but these speakers are like limited bandwidth, so we're not going to get much out of them. I said, I got another set for you to try. So I gave him the other set, and he plays about 4 measures and stops. He goes, these are worse than those. He goes, these sound like ass.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, okay. He goes, I said, well, that's all we got. He goes, well, he put his drumsticks on and goes, well, because I suggest you find something that sounds better, and walked off the riser. So that sent me down the path to learn, try to figure out what was inside an in-ear monitor and how to make it better.
So, and did you do that quite quickly back then?
It was a process. It took, I found out this place called Knowles made hearing aid components, and I called them, and they kind of gave me a clue on what some people were experimenting with. So they sent me out some stuff, and I basically was day to day getting through rehearsals and then sound checking the shows. And the whole time we're doing this, and he's not really happy with the audio, I'm experimenting with different, what they're called balanced armatures now for Knowles. And I found one that was a really good high frequency driver, but it didn't have any bottom end. And I had already realized that I'm going to have to use more than one speaker in these things to make them sound good. And then there's a guy named Rick Zanardo that worked for Knowles, and he was doing all the research and sourcing out the components from Knowles for me. And he calls me, goes, hey, I think I've got your bass driver. I found this in the armature graveyard. And it was what a CI can. And I guess it was originally designed to be put in a pacemaker. So when you were going to get a shock, it would alert you 140 decibel through your chest cavity, right? So I measured it. It was a perfect bass response. It had a perfect 4K roll off, and I put a capacitor in, and the first multi-driver in-ear monitor was designed. Wow. It's called the UE5.
Okay, so that was the first model with the UE5.
Yeah.
31 years later, there's been quite a few models, right?
There's been a ton of models, yeah.
How's that path been, though? How did you go from the UE5 to then go, okay, I need to make this better? So what was the next one, and then the one after?
The next one was the UE7, because the UE5 had one bass driver.
Yeah.
And the heavy metal bands were blowing up the bass driver.
Right.
So I decided I'm going to add another low end driver to it. I looked at them, and there were 2 spouts, and they were just far enough apart I could stretch a silicone tube over them. So voila, I had dual bass driver, and I used a little resistance, turned it down, and that was called the UE7, and that's still the loudest in-ear monitor on the planet. They could blow that up.
Okay. And then, so we've done 5s, we've done 7s that ended up with more low end and loud. And then
there were a few more in between that, but the next really, they're kind of just nothing special. At a 10 that came out, but the next one that was really kind of innovative was called the UE11.
Okay, I had a pair of those.
Yeah, and that was the first 3-way in-ear monitor, and I had and I'd figured out how to make a pseudo sub bass by taking a bunch of dampening material and stuffing it into the soundboard of the low driver. It would wipe out the highs, and so I basically had this slope, and then so I could make it a 3-way now. So I did a kind of a pseudo bandpass, driving it through a bunch of material. Then I high passed the mid driver and then put the high driver in there. So it was the first 3-way. And I tell you what, to this day, people still love that 11.
Yeah.
I could mix a rock show on it right now.
There's nothing wrong with an 11. It's great.
No, it's good.
But there's some now with even more drivers, right? And where did that come from? Where was the drive to put more drivers in? Was that you going, I can make this better by adding more? Or did actually that come from the consumer, user side going, we want more drivers because this is going to make it better?
No, because up until the Roxanne, which was the first 3-way quad driver, so it was a 12 driver, I was pretty much driving the configuration of how it went, because I went from, the 11, and I had what was called, when I started this new company, JH Audio, the first earpiece I made was the 13. It was actually 12 drivers, but I thought 13 was a luckier number. So, but it was a dual low, dual mid, dual high in each ear. It was the first, 3-way 6-driver earpiece, right? So, and the reason I went to quads was the first time was for the lows, because obviously every time you double the components, you get more headroom and dynamic range. But the main reason I did that was because with 4 drivers, I could wire it in series parallel, or parallel, depending on where I wanted to shift where I wanted the juice to go in the crossover, right? So if I wanted more bottom end, I just parallel up the lows and do series parallel on the other two. So, and then I ended up going back to running parallel on the high driver, because I found out that balanced armatures, as they rise in impedance, like they're 10 ohms at 1K, they'll be 100 ohms at 10K. So it's kind of like a hockey stick. And as the impedance rises, high frequencies rolled off. So I found that if I took 4 drivers, little miniature high drivers, had them wire them to 2 ohms, solder them in parallel, which was almost a direct short, then high pass them, I could actually get the headphone amp to actually see 16K at about 10 ohms. So that's how we got the extension of the top end in the early days. So that's why we went to 12 drivers, and I stopped there for years because that's all I really needed. And then it got to like the Gillette razor race of how many drivers can we get in an earpiece. I think there's some out there, 21 or 22
exactly.
Crazy drivers now.
But that's not necessary, right?
No, because actually what we're focused on now is we're focused on doing a lot more with a lot less.
Yes.
So all the things that I needed to use multiple components for, because we're now doing active crossovers, we're actually able to make the drivers much more efficient by using a real crossover. Instead of stuffing dampening material into the low driver, I actually can put a sub-bass low pass in and make that driver a real low driver instead of a pseudo low driver.
Right.
And then make the mid driver more efficient, high pass, low pass, and the high, just like we do with a large format PA system.
Okay, but your attention's not on moving that technology further. You taking it to the next level in that we're now looking at, well, you've named it Pearl. So why don't you explain how you got to wanting to move forward again from the passive drivers into this Pearl system, and what's Pearl going to do for the user?
Well, Pearl's the next generation of in-ear monitors. I had a couple of people over the booth we're here now say that, I can't unhear this. One guy told me this should be illegal because he's got to buy new earpieces. But so anyway, basically by using active crossover, we can make a perfect timed earpiece. So we have perfect phase response. We can have a perfect frequency response. We can tune it with an infinite amount of frequency responses. It can be an NS10, it can be a big rock PA, We can do hearing compensation, which I've done a lot for older musicians or engineers and got that musician's notch. I've replaced, I've compensated from hearing from moderate to all the way profound. And, it's really nice when you see someone that's had that kind of severe hearing loss, that when you see their eyes and they can hear like they're 25 years old again.
So am I right in thinking you've created the PA for the ears, in that how PA systems drive low drivers, mid drivers, high drivers separately? Pearl is an active amplification, and you've now got complete control electronically of the driver sets.
Absolutely. So now I can use 2 drivers instead of 4 drivers, and if I want to get that little sweetness on the top end, I just put an equalization filter in, and it's like magic. And then before, I would take all of the drivers, and the low driver was the slowest in time, and the mid driver was a little faster, and the high driver was even faster. And the only way I could make the sound of each of those arrive at the same time at the soundboard was by increasing the length of the faster drivers. So if you look at some of my old earpieces, like the Roxanne, there's an 1 3/16 of tubing on that, and inside the ear. We're like,
that's why they're so big.
That's why they're so big, because I could never ship something that wasn't in phase. But now I can use 3 duals. It's tiny. I've got 6 drivers that fit in something the size of a Shurebud, and there's nothing on the planet audio wise that can compete with it because of the processing.
So you've mentioned there's a 6 driver for the Pearl,
yes.
And then there's a 12 driver. Is that
correct?
There's
a 6 driver called the Rosie,
and
then there's a 12 driver called Ruby 2.
And you've been demonstrating that here today, and you're getting comments like, "I can't unhear this."
Oh yeah, it's next level. Everybody, it blows everybody's mind when they take a listen to it.
But this is also, I've had from demonstrations from you, that you can actually make the new Pearl system sound like all the other drivers that you've made, right?
Yeah, I've modeled all of my earpieces. So let's say that somebody has a JH7, a JH13, a JH11 on stage. I basically can flash that back and make the Pearl, either the Rosie or the Ruby 2, have the same exact frequency response as that. And I've also modeled some competitors' earpieces, and I can continue to do that. So if someone's got a 64, or someone's got a UE, you can basically flash the Pearl as a monitor engineer and have the same frequency response as that earpiece.
So it's complete freedom.
It's total freedom. Infinite.
And so this is the dream.
It's a dream, and this is just the beginning of it. I mean, it's going to get slicker, faster, smaller. So active is definitely the way of the future.
I'm excited to watch this journey, and I'm going to be alongside you as we go.
Absolutely.
So it's great to have you as part of the Sound Devices family. And yeah, it's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time. We're going to build some really cool stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Baggy.